What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know, and it's closing arguments, one of my favorite parts of any trial. And we talk every time about how the research shows more cases are won and lost in opening statements than closing arguments, but closing arguments are an incredibly important tool for lawyers to use before sending the jury back to deliberate. We'll talk about what that tool specifically is, how the lawyers use it in this case, which lawyer used it better than the next. You may be surprised with some of my takes on closing argument as usual. I want to hear what you guys thought. I want to hear your takes. And we are right now sitting about one block from the courthouse in Tallahassee. I literally just got here. My wife dropped me off. I'm at John's office. I have 17 different screens open here. So you'll see my eyes going everywhere. But guess what? We're going to break down. We're going to recap. We're going to react to these closing arguments. If there's a verdict happening right now, we may live stream that too. We're going to keep an eye on court. John's right over here. He's going to have that stream up. We're going to answer all your questions. All you need to do is sit back, relax, and hit that like button. Let's get to it. Yes, everybody's saying new office. This is John's office. I'm sitting in John's office in Tallahassee. And we're here for the game this weekend, and maybe we'll be here for a verdict tomorrow. Who the heck knows? But so much has happened today in this case, as last night there started to be some rumblings of potentially Donna changing her mind and wanting to testify. We talked about that yesterday, how it is possible potentially to reopen your case in chief to call a witness or add in some evidence or something like that. Didn't end up happening today. People are asking who John is. John is the producer, the behind the scenes guy that runs all the stuff on the channel, as well as Kelsey, who's in here in the chat as well. So we knew that was a possibility. I think the judge might not have allowed it in this case. Most judges, I think, would allow it. I've had that happen in cases before, but we don't really need to dig into that because it didn't happen. At least we didn't see it. It may have happened at sidebar. There may have been conversations off the record that we didn't watch. But what we did get to see today was all the reading of the jury instructions and, of course, closing arguments. And I tweeted right after the beginning of Ms. Kaplan's closing argument, which is what we're about to watch together, that it was an A+ beginning to closing. You grip the jury, you get them on your side, you get them to understand how important this decision is that they are going to make today. You take some shots at the other side, and then you dive into your best evidence and arguments that you have in the case. But as we go along, we're going to talk about the high moments, the low moments. I'm going to play a lot of highlights throughout both closing arguments. Everybody always asks for my rating of the closing arguments. We will give that as well at the end of each one. And yeah, both of them, I think, took most of the time. I know the prosecutor went overtime. We'll talk about that. I don't know. I think the defense probably got pretty close to the full amount of time that they were allotted. It was longer than I expected it to be from the defense, with kind of a weird pause in the middle of it. But we're going to get to all that. Let's start with how the state started their closing argument here in Donna Adelson's trial. So we're flipping cameras. All right, we have flipped cameras. We knew there was going to be an issue here. I at least knew there was going to be an issue. So is it this computer camera? Okay. All right. So let's try this again. And it won't go full here either. Whatever. All right, whatever. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm going to back it up so we can listen to that again.
Victim in this case. A son, a brother, a colleague, a mentor, a professor, a friend, but most of all, a father, a dad. A dedicated and loving father whose downfall was brought about by the fact that his number one priority was maximizing his time with those little boys in the wake of a bitter divorce from their mother. Defense called witnesses to come in here and give you an expert opinion that his divorce and the subsequent litigation was not contentious. Not contentious to whom? It was contentious to Dan Markel. It was contentious to Wendy Adelson. And it was contentious to this defendant. And then after telling you what a great guy Dan Markel was in opening statements, they called witnesses to tell you what a pain in the butt he was. And he was a pain in the butt.
Okay, so everybody's saying echo. I muted my mic. I don't know if that helped at all. Okay, fixed. All right. Everything's on a slight delay here. All right, I'll mute my mic while we play the video.
butt to those people, those awful lawyers that can't even admit that divorces are emotionally charged. He was a pain in their butts. He was a pain in Wendy's butt, and he was a pain in Donna's butt. Why? Because this was his life we were talking about. Dan Markel was not a file on some lawyer's desk. He was a real person who cared passionately about every scrap of paper in that divorce file. He wasn't some bumbling idiot. He was a Harvard-educated law professor. And yeah, he was making it as difficult as possible for this defendant to get her non-negotiable, which just also happened to be Dan Markel's non-negotiable, those two little boys. You have learned about this conspiracy and how it has unraveled over the last 11 years since Dan Markel's death. The defendants in this case have all attempted to point fingers at each other. They have argued that the state's theory is right. It's right. You got it right with everybody except for me. I didn't do it.
I didn't notice the Spider-Man picture of all them pointing at each other. But so she started out with one of the big points that we talked about throughout the trial, which was the way the defense decided to handle Dan Markel as the victim, calling him Danny, saying how amazing he is, saying how sad all of this was, and creating a scenario where there is sympathy on their side as well, because Donna loves Dan Markel. Everybody loves Dan Markel. And from the perspective of the jury, we want you to be on our side because it is horrible what happened to Dan Markel. And we need justice for Dan Markel. And those shooters are the bad guys, not little old grandma Donna. But then when they put those experts on, those lawyers on, I should say, yesterday, they talked about how Dan Markel was verbose and making these arguments that made no sense and had no legal reasoning. And he was accusing people of fraud when he had no evidence of it, and gibbers because he was gibberish and just making things that didn't make any sense. So basically she turns that into a bumbling idiot. They called him a bumbling idiot after saying how great he was. And to me, with a lot of you, it struck a chord when they talked about Dan Markel like that. And when you have a scenario where that's how you talk about the victim after saying what an amazing guy he is, when you can contradict yourself as the defense, right? You can have, alternate theories or theories that can mean different things because it's the state's burden to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. The problem is when your theories come at odds with each other and you're arguing two things that don't make sense, that's when you can start to get yourself into trouble. And from my perspective, how they dealt with the victim, Dan Markel, was a way that the defense got into a little bit of trouble in this case. Then the prosecutor goes into the facts of what happened, how the investigation was great, and they got the bad guys. They talk about how this whole thing had to do with solicitation and the train cars. And we know that Katie was the connection between the Adelsons and the shooters, and Charlie solicited Katie. But who solicited Charlie? That was a big question they had throughout this case. And we all know that Charlie didn't care about Wendy's divorce. He cared about his jet skis and his toys, but his mom was his number one lady. And Donna is the one who solicited Charlie to handle the dirty work because she was controlling everybody's life. Then they talked more about how obviously contentious this divorce was, how Donna's involvement was obvious, and how she was drafting parts of these motions and editing them, and the relocation was life or death to her. She was in control of everybody's life, whether it was screening men for Wendy or jobs or houses, whatever it was. And to Dan Markel, raising the boys in his faith the way that he wanted to was incredibly. Oh, I thought that was cheering, but it's a ambulance siren. How raising the boy in his faith was very important to him. And Donna used that against him, but that's one of the reasons Dan was fighting so hard with this relocation, obviously, and he just loved his children. She's also talking about how the defense lawyers on one hand called Dan brilliant, on one hand call him a gibbering idiot. She talked about how meticulous Donna was, and she was not stupid. She was not, this little old ho-hum grandma. She wasn't in a situation where she can't figure out what to do in different situations. She was meticulous. She was detailed, and she was in a scenario where she kept track of Dan's travel schedule for 4 years to use it against him. She had detailed notes in her planner. Just read the notes in the planner and you'll see how detailed and controlling Donna Adelson was. She knew his driver's license number, his driver's license plate number. She knew his travel schedule all the way up to the time he died. And in Donna Adelson's case, the ends always justify the means. She was going to do whatever she needed to do to get those boys, including the Nazi uniforms and the other nasty examples that the prosecutor could read from Donna Adelson's own emails, her own words. Then she talked about the timeline of when Charlie was dating Katie, when Wendy was dating Jeff, and the conversations that were had so that everybody was on the same page about what they needed to do. And Wendy even confided in and told Jeff that this is what Charlie was planning. She also argues the grandma motion, the grandma issues were not buried. You know, you can quibble about that. Where were they? The pressure cooker was hotter and hotter, according to this prosecutor. She also did a good job, I think, to discredit the expert, to say the expert said Wendy wasn't even deposed. How does she not know that? How does she not know that Wendy was in fact deposed and worried about getting deposed again, and how much pressure that was putting on Wendy and the Adelsons and the family as a whole? She also did a really good job. I love, this was one of my favorite parts of the closing arguments, just as a whole, was she would read these emails where Donna Adelson was calling Dan Markel an a-hole and an effer. And she would be like, yeah, super amicable, which is why when you have a completely illogical theory of defense, you've got to throw it out. You know, unless you have something to back it up and show, listen, I know this might defy logic, but let me explain to you why this is still correct. Even though it defies logic, the defense did not do this and that in this case. And to me, that was a swing and a miss with that whole amicable divorce theory. And if you remember, we're going to jump ahead a little bit to the defense's closing. They're like, we're going to explain to you why we called all these witnesses, because you may have been sitting there thinking, why did they call this witness? That's never good if you have to admit that in your closing argument, which the defense said they were going to do. And they never really went back and went witness by witness to explain to me why they called all these witnesses and why they chose the witnesses that they did. They really never got there when it came to it. And I thought the prosecutor did a better job of explaining just how wrong they are and how they're basically trying to blow smoke at this jury, saying this was an amicable divorce. Then they get into Donna's specific involvement, right? Because we have, you know, Charlie did this, Katie did this, Sigfredo did this, Luis Rivera did this. But Donna had motive. She had to do something to get the ends that she wanted. She was controlling. She was offering money to fix problems. She went to the house and gave Charlie the money, at least according to the state's theory and what they say the evidence says. And she got the end result she wanted. And how do we know that this all just worked perfectly according to plan for Donna right at the time was committed? Of course, you have the text, I'm outside your house, Charlie, but also a very important portion of this case is what happened afterwards.
She didn't cut at $35,000. We don't know the amount of Garcia's cut, but we know he got at least enough to buy a car and a motorcycle. All right, so July 20th, the defendant and Harvey Adelson take Wendy and the boys back to South Florida, 2 days after, not even 48 hours after Dan Markel is shot. They're gone.
Not even 48 hours after Dan Markel is gone and dead, but the Adelsons take the boys to South Florida. She doesn't bring them to the funeral, and they're changing their name. They change it within a year, but they are using Adelson as the boy's last name almost immediately. This to me is also incredibly damning, that this is exactly what Donna Adelson wanted. It's what she got, and it happened within 48 hours. Okay, listen, just FYI, volume is what it's going to be with the court. I'll try to remember to mute my mic as much as I can. Just kind of is what it is. We're going to have to roll with it for this video.
Relocation granted. On the way, Wendy receives a call from Detective Isom. She tells him that the call's breaking up, and she hangs up, afterwards referring him to her lawyer. Catherine Magbanowa that day, or thereabouts, opens her Ziploc bag of money and finds her cut to be $100 bills stapled together in $1,000 stacks. How we know Charlie keeps his money. She also notes that her cut is damp and moldy. She mentions this to Charlie, and he tells her that his mother washed the money. like laundered, like washed. Rob Adelson gets a call from Donna Adelson advising him not to talk to the FBI. What? Rob Adelson gets a call from this defendant advising him not to talk to the FBI, just in case they call. He says, well, I already did. She says, well, you don't know anything anyway, and hangs up.
So also, right after all this is happening, when everything's coming out and Rob Adelson, her son, is talking to the cops, trying to figure out what happened to his brother-in-law, she's like, don't talk to the cops. He says, well, I already did. She's like, it's okay. You don't know anything anyway. So we have scenarios of the actions Donna Adelson took right after all this happened are incredibly damning. And it's not just, so some people are getting confused with, there's no evidence Donna did anything before, and assuming that you can't use actions afterwards to have reasonable inferences about what she did before. So that is something I want to clear up. Everybody's like, oh, the bump was after. She changed their names after. She took them to South Florida after. She confessed, if you want to believe that, to the jailhouse snitch after. Those actions that she took after getting a one-way ticket to Vietnam, all those actions of what she did after relate back to what she did and what she knew and how involved she was before. So that's all important to remember. Just because they are after the fact facts doesn't mean they don't relate back to what she did before. So that's important. Okay. Let me get to a couple questions here. Ugo Monk. I know closing arguments are not evidence, but so much of this case was built on the interpretation of calls and text messages, and I can see both sides. Does that mean I would have to vote not guilty? If you do not have a strong conviction of guilt, that you feel you're sure they point to Donna Adelson as a co-conspirator and a principal in this case, and that she solicited these actions for this crime, then yes, I would say you would vote guilty. If you're saying like 50-50, it could go either way, I'm thinking more likely she did it than not, that's a not guilty vote. And I agree with you that we're dealing with a scenario where it depends. And the rebuttal argument from the state is like, yeah, we're both going to sit here and see the evidence different and make our arguments. You guys are going to have to look at the evidence and make your decision. How does a lawyer decide when to object during closings? Why would a lawyer not like to object during closing? Strategy. So it's kind of like an unwritten rule. Like we don't object a lot during closing because you get a lot of leeway to make these arguments. So unless they're arguing facts, not in evidence, they're making up a fact or something that came out in a deposition of a witness and the lawyer forgot it didn't come out at trial, you really try not to object. Or if it's the golden rule, like imagine if this were you, members of the jury, and you were sitting in her chair, how would you like to be treated like this? That's the golden rule, telling the jury to stand in the defendant or any party's shoes. That is inappropriate. So really only certain objections you make during closing, because we know there's a lot of leeway and you don't want to create an unreasonable burden for them going through and just kind of throw them off. It's not appropriate in closing and the judge would reprimand you. Just joined. Curious if the fact that Donna's nosiness in Rob's marriage was the reason for the estrangement mentioned. They never said. I don't recall hearing that, and I feel it definitely would be admissible. So the only thing I heard was that they never spoke again because she didn't want to talk about what happened with Dan. She called him after the anniversary, didn't mention anything about it. And that's how the prosecutor led me to believe that's why their relationship was estranged and they never spoke again. Peter, don't stress, don't apologize. We're good. It's part of my inner being. It's just how I'm going to be when things like this happen. It's okay, Peter. As EDB says, streaming is dynamic. They're living, breathing things like trials, right? Thank you, Matthew, for the super sticker. Neo the One, thank you for gifting 20 Lawyer You Know memberships. And this is great, right? We had to sit here and deal with some bumps in the beginning, but a bunch of new members got to join today, so it's always a good thing. Okay, let's talk about now how Donna acted after the bump was anything but normal, basically, is what she has to say here.
July 24th, 2014, last month after their father was killed. There's no reason in the world why she would write these checks. The defense said in opening that Charlie told Donna to write the checks because it was his business. But
I'm going to mute myself, but I got to jump up a little and see. She wrote 43 checks. We know that. All right, here's the mute.
Seen her with lots of other things to do. She's going to be asking questions. And we heard that Charlie testified that he told his mother about extortion. He says he was being extorted, right? All right, let's fast forward to October of 2015. Charlie's had a couple girlfriends since the murder and is now dating June Mchinda. Remember her? June, one of Charlie's girlfriends that testified, she said they were enjoying a fairy tale relationship in October of 15. During her relationship with Charlie, June observes that Charlie packages his money in an unusual way. $100 bills stapled into $1,000 stacks. Someone who liked detail, I don't care. It doesn't concern me. As someone who liked details and who always stayed on top of everything, her total lack of interest in who killed her former son-in-law, her grandchildren's father, is totally out of character. From July of 14 to April of 16, Donna Adelson got everything she wanted. Wendy and the kids were in South Florida where she could drop them off and pick them up, manage their schoolwork, their tennis, their piano lessons, and have her sunshines with her every day. All the while, she's steady paying for the murder of their father. Everyone is living their best life, thinking they've gotten away with murder until the bump. Everything changed on April 19, 2016, when the bump occurred. The undercover approaches Donna and hands her a piece of paper. The most human reaction in the world is to look at the paper. About the way she conducts herself in the minutes, hours, and days after the undercover approaches her with that paper. The bump and the wire were designed to expose the co-conspirators and their roles in this conspiracy, and it did. Here, we're just 10 minutes later. There's only one thing a normal person would do if approached on the street by a stranger who appears to be threatening harm to them in some way. A normal, or maybe I should say an innocent person would, 1, look at the paper. She didn't do that. 2, get to safety. Get help, contact law enforcement or your husband or somebody that's going to come help you. Get somewhere safe. What you would not do is lead the bad guy right to the grandchildren. The last thing a normal, innocent person would do is go get her little grandchildren and walk right back down the same block with them where this stranger just approached her. But that is exactly what she does. Then she gets on the phone with Charlie and says absolutely nothing about Dan Markel. His picture's on the paper. What she does say on the wire, which by the way is direct evidence, I know y'all like that, some direct evidence, when Charlie.
So she refers back to jury selection a bunch, and that's really smart to do because you remember as the lawyer what you talked about, what they wanted. They want direct evidence, and the wires and Donna's own voice and admissions and what she says is the direct evidence she's talking about here. And I really love how she's about to weave in Donna's own voice, what she says on these recordings. If you can't hear them, I'll repeat some of them because they might be hard to hear, but explaining exactly how this was all set up and how unafraid she was to walk her grandkids right back down that spot, to call Charlie, to not call the cops, to not want to talk about it on the phone, to know how to do all of this. And I'm saving the tool that is closing argument for a point that Georgia Kappelman makes because she does it perfectly at one point in this closing. And right when she says, I'm going to say, boom, that's the point of closing arguments. It's not really to like convince the jury of a new way to see the facts, right? They kind of know how you feel about the facts at this point from both sides. It's a different reason. And I've talked about it before. So you guys can, that have been around a while, probably know where I'm going with this, but she gives a really great illustration of exactly how we use closing arguments as.
Ask Donna on states 99, call A. Does it involve me or other people? Well, probably both of us. That is direct evidence. If anyone in that jury room wants to acquit her, make them tell you how that is not a confession. In call B, Charlie.
There it is. She said, if anybody wants to acquit in the jury room, ask them how that is not a confession. It involves the two of us. It's the picture of Dan Markel, not a lot of other information, and how she acts afterwards. Ask the juror in the room how that is not a confession. So what is the point of closing arguments? The tool that is closing arguments is you want to arm the jurors that are on your side, that are voting what you think justice is. So in this case, the jurors that believe Donna Adelson is guilty, you want to give them the facts, the arguments, the direct evidence, the circumstantial evidence, the legal explanations, so that when they go back there and they start arguing and jurors are saying different things, and some are saying I want to acquit. You say, well, what about this? What about this confession? What about the bump? What about the washing of the money? What about the motive? What about the grandma motion? That's why you want to highlight these pieces of evidence that the jury can go back there and argue, can be your mouthpiece as a lawyer, because you're done. You're done with the arguing. So they're going to be your mouthpiece. In the defense's side, you want to bring up the holes, the reasonable doubt. You want to bring up the arguments that help you, that make jurors want to vote not guilty. So each side is arming the jurors that are with them in their camp, assuming there might be jurors on both sides here. But that's what you do in closing argument, and that's exactly what this prosecutor did for most of her closing argument. So here's what I'll say, just kind of overall thoughts of her closing. I thought it was really good, highlighting really strong points. I think there's one area that she went into that I would not have done. I'll explain why. And that made the closing feel just a little bit long as well. I know they had enough time, but that would be my one critique. And when she gets there, we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Charlie calls back because he can't stand it. And he asked his mother, will you send me a picture of the bump flyer? No, I don't want to do that. Well, why not? Why not? Normal, nice little old lady who knows nothing about this murder and has nothing to do with it. If Charlie's the one making you write the checks and Charlie's the one that knows something about it, send him a picture of it. He's asking for it. She doesn't want to do that. Why not? Call C, Charlie calls back to say, don't talk about things in the apartment. Oh, obviously. Obviously, we can't talk about things in the apartment. What's obvious? Is it obvious to you? This TV was probably about 5. She's the original code talker. This TV, and look what he says. They asked you for $5,000. He decodes it. He's not the one talking in code. He's decoding it and saying what he's picking up what she's putting down. There's no TV mentioned by the undercover operative that approached Donna Adelson on the street.
All right, so they start to get into the code. And again, the defense tried to say, it's not code, it's just hints. They were giving each other hints because they don't want to talk about it. It's like when she was making that argument in closing for the defense, I don't feel like she was believing it. And if you're a lawyer and you're going to make the closing argument, my dad talks about this all the time. He's like, I convince myself sometimes, and even in some of these unwinnable cases, by the time I'm done with my closing argument, that I'm going to win. And that's how you have to be as a lawyer. You've got to believe in your argument because the jury can usually pick up. And in civil cases, a lot of times it's like, don't ask for too much money. Don't ask for too little money. Ask for the right amount of money that you believe in. Don't ask for a number you don't believe in as a lawyer. And that felt a little bit of that in the defense's closing. Okay, then she goes into how June, Charlie's ex-girlfriend, and Ryan noticed Charlie acting different around the time of the bump. And then here's where she goes into Charlie's theory of extortion. She goes deep, explaining to the jury exactly what Charlie's defense was, how stupid it is, how it's not something that's realistic, it's totally illogical. And the prior jury agreed. Problem is, I don't think it was very clear what Charlie's defense was in this case. I think the jury may have been confused about that whole discussion argument, and I don't think it was necessarily going to help Donna. And she took a lot of time digging into that. There were some snippets of it that I thought if she would have just said one or two things, it would have been good. I think she just went into Charlie's extortion too much. Letter Rose by Better Rose said, Charlie's defense, Peter, that's the part I assume you didn't think Georgia needed. See, you guys have been here long enough. You can kind of predict where I'm going to go with some of my arguments and some of my thoughts, which I love. Golden Mom said, love your knowledge and unbiased perspective. I'm learning so much from you. Thank you. Thank you to Golden Mom for that. I appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Abigail, what's up? I just feel like first degree is more of a probably, so not guilty, but conspiracy was proven. I just can't get past at how high the burden is for the state. I get it. I totally understand. But if you think she was a principal in the conspiracy and knew before and solicited and wanted it to happen and paid people to happen and set it up with Charlie, she's probably guilty of everything, right? It's not just that. And I'm not saying she's probably guilty of everything. If you think she's guilty of conspiracy, I would say that she's also guilty of that first degree. Legally, if we really broke down how it all works. But I talked about this with my dad, and sometimes you put both in there, even though it might be redundant, because a juror might think exactly the way you're thinking and say, not on first degree, but yes on conspiracy. That's why it's there. Maria said, in Denver for CrimeCon, wishing you were here too. Maybe one day I will make it out to one of these CrimeCons. Jacqueline, how do you think the evidence against Donna compares to the evidence against Lori Vallow? More damning, less, about the same? Always appreciate your thoughts. Gosh, it's very different, right? It's very different. Lori Vallow, to me, it was so obvious because of her. It's almost like, possession is 3/4 of the law as far as property goes. And she had the kids. She was in charge of the kids. She had control of the kids. So what happened to the kids, under her watch is different because Donna was not with Dan Markel when this happened to him. So it's very different. I would say it was much more damning and worse for Lori Vallow personally. I know it wasn't great, but the closing was the best part of the defense's case. Low bar, I know. So Chuck, hold that thought. Hold that thought, because I may partially agree with you. Peter, do you think removing the lesser included charges by the defense was a good move? I think that they admitted that this was an M. This was an execution. They just said it is these two guys, and maybe Charlie, maybe Wendy. We're going to get to that part of the defense as well. Are you going to Tallahassee? Janet asked. I am here right now in Tallahassee, in John's office, hence all of the technical difficulties here. We're a different setup, but now I've got my laptop here, so it's simpler, probably not as good quality, but it is what it is. Edward, thank you so much for gifting 5 Lawyer memberships. And let's get back to a little snippet of when they talk about Charlie's defense. I'm going to do my best to find this spot.
Body in his driveway, and the cops will not ask any questions because he's a dentist. Why are we not talking on the phone if we had nothing to do with it? Why are we not talking on the phone if we're being extorted and we're the victims here? Why are we not reporting it to the police if we're being extorted and we're the victims here? If the cops are listening, we're not reporting it to the cops because we're afraid they'll come kill us if we do that. Well, talk about it on the phone. If they're listening, they'll hear it. They'll know you're being extorted, but they don't do that because it's bull. Discussion about how he's going to start arming himself. So Charlie says at Dolce Vita, I'm going to start, I don't remember his words exactly, but he's going to start carrying a gun and he's prepared to shoot. And he goes through a scenario where, he might have to kill somebody in his driveway and the cops will not ask any questions because he's a dentist. If he's been an extortion victim for 2 years, why is he just now starting to carry a gun? And then he says, if somebody comes up to me asking for money in my house, he's going to shoot them. This is the same guy that's been too paralyzed by fear over the last 2 years to report his victimization to the police or to anyone. This is a guy of considerable resources that could, get some muscle or some help or something, not just roll over and open his safe and give all his money to some girl that's not even armed. This is a tough guy that would never tolerate somebody coming up to him at his house and asking for money. But he's talking to the woman who supposedly did that exact thing, came into his house and asked him for money. He doesn't mention, well, I gave you the money, but I'm not.
So this is earlier than I wanted to play, but you get the idea of how much she really goes in to Charlie's defense. I mean, she goes all the way into Charlie's defense. She breaks it down, explains why it was not something that is actually logical, not something that's real, not something that you should consider. But again, that's focusing more on Charlie, not as much on Donna. But eventually she gets to the fact that she says something to the effect of Donna wants to adopt Charlie's story when it suits her, but this trial, she tried to distance herself from it. I don't think they necessarily explicitly did that, but there was an objection by the defense. They have a sidebar and then they come right back. And the defense was kind of saying they're commenting on her right to remain silent, which I don't necessarily agree with that. But I do think it's actually a proper argument to say she's using this extortion to help her, but then saying, okay, Charlie did it and distancing herself from the extortion. Like, I didn't really know what was going on. And I thought that was kind of a good argument, but too much time spent on it.
Story was that he and his mom were involved in the sense that they were extorted by Catherine McDaniel, so they knew who did the killing. They just didn't speak up because they were scared because they're being extorted. Donna Adelson calls Charlie's story the truth when it suits her to support her son and proclaim his innocence during his trial, but now she kind of wants to distance herself from that because it's a ridiculous story. It's not the truth. The truth wasn't out. Don't let her distance herself. She adopted that statement as the truth. She's stuck with it.
There's a pressure.
So that's where they're saying she's commenting on her right to remain silent. She's burden shifting. She's making them prove something, and that's not appropriate. You can't do that. They send the jury out, and we hear this argument, which I thought was an interesting legal argument.
The comments being made in the closing argument of the state, and I don't like to interrupt closing, so I apologize for that. But there have been several comments that have been made that are burden shifting and commenting on my client's right to remain silent. She's stood before this jury and said that the defense has some other version. She said this in a text, but now they're saying something different. We don't have an obligation to answer any of this. She's insinuating to the jury that we're going to come up there and provide her version of events. She chose not to testify.
It's kind of an argument concerning this.
Ms. Adelson has made adoptive admissions and has suggested other alternative theories that have been developed through cross-examination. I'm entitled to comment on those theories.
Concerning
The judge agrees with the prosecutor, and she is allowed to make those connections. And you don't want to stay anywhere near that if you're the prosecutor, but I think that's totally appropriate argument. She wasn't commenting on her Fifth Amendment right. Then she talks about how they set up this conspiracy to insulate them from each other. Donna saying she was out of the loop is exactly that. And near the end of the closing, the prosecutor ends really strong. So we're gonna talk about that. Rob called and wanted to tell his mom they got the guys. It's the last time he ever talked to his mom. Charlie's lawyers meeting with Garcia's lawyers, who's meeting with Katie all at the same time, way before they're ever arrested. Why is that happening if they're not involved? Googling blackmail versus extortion. Blackmail means there is dirt on you. That's not good for them, so they didn't choose that one. Then she deals with the jailhouse snitches, right? It's clear they're trying to buy some testimony. Then she gets into Wendy's involvement. If they thought this was real, Wendy and the kids would be in danger. You know I'm next is what Donna said. Then she gets into Vietnam and how she flees to Vietnam and it's a one-way ticket and all that you know is very good. Then she starts listing direct evidence. I do want to hear some of this, so let's jump ahead to that.
This is the defendant, Wendy Adelson. You know I'm next, but that won't happen. I'll take care of that. An important insight into her state of mind when you're considering this evidence about her flight to Vietnam. All right, 11/6/23, Charlie's jury is deliberating. The defendant gets angry about Wendy sending prayer hands. I guess, your brother's on trial for his life and you're sending prayer hands, an emoji. She says, protected his sister for years. Protected her? Protected her from what? Would he need to protect her from the knowledge that they were being extorted? Or does it make more sense that the protection that's referred to is the murder and the fact that this defendant is a little angry that Wendy doesn't seem to appreciate what she views as a huge sacrifice that her brother has made for her and her benefit? Wendy's not charged. This was all for her. 11/6/2023, Charlie is convicted. Nothing about the extortion defense adds up for Charlie, and it doesn't add up for Donna Adelson either. It's true that she did not pull the trigger. She's guilty of first degree murder as a principle, which we talked about at jury selection, about how a party who assists in the murder can be charged and convicted the same as the person that pulled the trigger, even if they're not physically present when the trigger is pulled, which is not disputed that she was not. And you all agreed to follow that law, even if you ended up not liking it. Right? I don't know if anyone admitted to not liking it, but you don't really know if you're going to like it or not until you have.
So that's kind of Abigail's question, right? It's like if she's a principal and she's involved in this conspiracy and she did this, you agreed, the law says she's guilty of M. And Abigail, I think if I was going to guess, if you were sitting back there and you were reading the words and the breakdown of the definitions and how it all works, I think if you were sitting back there in that jury room, based on what you said about the conspiracy, I think there are some potential jurors that could convince you she's also guilty of the N. They are staying late. Is that a good sign? This judge lets them stay late anyways, but usually you can stay really late if you tell the judge we're working, we're getting close. I think Charlie Adelson, it was 3 hours, which you guys know better than I do. I think we're coming up close to 3 hours of deliberations at this point. I was thinking we'd have it before lunchtime tomorrow, but maybe it's Gator Girl just said 2 hours and 42 minutes. Hey, Peter, if the jury comes back not guilty on one of the charges, how might that impact her potential sentence? Thanks for all you do. probably not going to matter at all. I mean, depending on which one it is, but it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. Yolanda, another incriminating incident was the jail phone call between Charlie and Donna, where she states looking for non-extradition places, not guilty. That's going to become a really big point when we get to the defense's closing that I'm going to want to bring up. Happy to hear you every day after court ends. It's always fun doing these trials and getting to hang out, and you start to catch a vibe and a groove that we do this together every night. And I always love that. That's why I love covering these trials so much daily. Peter, if there is a verdict tonight, will you go to the court? I'm in gym shorts and this Florida State t-shirt. But maybe we'll pop over to the courthouse just to see what's popping over there. I got my Crocs and socks on. I will be a much better juror for listening to you. Art and Grace, thank you so much. That is awesome. I've heard that from a lot of people that are about to be sitting on juries, and I love to hear that. I loved it. It might be my favorite thing to come from this YouTube channel, and it was very unexpected. Can you go live from midfield from Bobby Bowden Field? Well, Tommy Castellanos, your help would probably get me to midfield. Liz, what makes a good defense attorney in trials like this when the evidence is stacked against your client? Love your channel. You focus on what your best defense is, right? Like what she didn't know. If she didn't do anything beforehand, she wasn't a co-conspirator, she didn't have any involvement, she was paying Katie Mabanawa after, but really focus more on the lack of evidence beforehand. Don't argue it was an amicable divorce, like stuff like that. It's a swing and a miss to me. Focus on poking the holes. What can the state prove? What can they not prove? Pointing the finger more at Charlie and Wendy, potentially, have somebody else to point the finger at, and Sigfredo and Luis that you actually believe are guilty. If you're not, it's a really case-by-case basis, but you can always find something that if you truly believe your client is innocent or not guilty, or the state cannot prove this case, that you really focus on that, where the state falls short. Neo the One, I'm 72, battling the big seed. Oh man, that sucks. For a few years now, I'm losing, but I haven't given up. I'm not a member, but prefer to donate them instead. I've learned so much from you guys. Thank you all. Neo, thank you so much for coming, for hanging out with us, for spending time with us. It's valuable time. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your input. I hope you can hang with us for many, many more years to come. We're going to listen to a little bit more of this argument.
To make a decision. If you don't like it, you still must apply it. You know that I can trust you to do that. We talked in jury selection about the difference between direct and circumstantial evidence. And it's true that this is largely a circumstantial case. You might recall my powdered donuts example. I had direct evidence that it was the kid not covered in powdered donuts, but we agreed that being covered in the powdered donuts was pretty good evidence that that's the child that ate the donuts. This case is not entirely circumstantial. I mean, she's covered in powdered donuts. Don't get me wrong. But there is direct evidence as well. And I want to go.
I have a feeling that this was a big thing in jury selection because that's the second time she's mentioned it. And now she's about to list what she considers to be direct evidence. I agree with most of it, that it is direct evidence. Some is kind of borderline, but telling the jury it's direct evidence and listing it for any juror that's going back there being like, because the defense is like, we even asked the cop, there's no direct evidence of this, as if circumstantial evidence is not enough. But let's listen to what she has to say.
Go over those. To Rob, when told that he'd already spoken to the police, she says, well, you don't know anything anyway. That's direct evidence. You can consider that as direct evidence. To Charlie, after being handed an article about Dan Markel's murder, it involves both of us. It involves the two of us. Number 3, 44 checks to the killer, signed by Donna Adelson. Catherine Magbanua admits she was in a plot to kill Dan Markel. And she got 44 checks, and they were all signed by this woman. Next, that license plate number. She had the car, make, model, and license plate in her 2014 planner. Her statements to Bird, she admitted she did what she was accused of. The script written by this defendant in this defendant's handwriting for Drina Bernhardt to come in here and deliver to y'all about stuff that wasn't true. She also speaks in code. Innocent people do not speak in code, ladies and gentlemen. And consider the things she didn't do. She didn't want to talk on the phone. She didn't want to talk in the apartment. She did not want to send a picture of the bump flyer to Charlie. She didn't say the name of Dan Markel. Anywhere on that wire, she did not say his name. Dan, Danny, Gibbers, that asshole, nothing. Why not? And she didn't go to the police. nice, normal Jewish grandmother approached on the street about a murder and an extortion attempt. She didn't go to the police? Why not? After Charlie's found guilty, the defendant sends this text to Wendy Adelson. Your brother protected you for years. Now you are not guilty. Your lawyer took very good care of you. You can bury me in the dress that I bought for Lincoln's bar mitzvah. Does not sound at that moment as if she's totally committed to attending the bar mitzvah. You heard that open line call where she's making plans to either flee or kill herself. She is distraught over the verdict. And she's distraught over the knowledge that she's next. The defense has tried to sell you that her emergency fast-track visa and one-way ticket to a non-extradition country was a vacation. On November 7th of 2023, this defendant Googled a list of U.S. extradition treaties. She was looking for a non-extradition country, and she booked a ticket to one with a stop in another non-extradition country.
It's pretty damning. Like, the Googling part is really huge when it comes to that, because that tells you her mindset. It's not just looking for a nice vacation and I'll come back. She specifically Googled this, and that's how she made her decision. And one of the final lines in this closing argument was, don't let her get away with this the way she thought she could get away with it. Meaning not having a connection to Katie or to Sigfredo or to Rivera, talking in code, talking about a TV, talking about five, talking about the two of us. Let's not talk in person. Don't let her get away with it exactly the way she wanted to. And they talked about all these ways they were going to kind of beat the system and beat the investigation. That's what she was pointing at. I thought that was really good as well. I think the beginning and the end were really good. Some parts in the middle, again, I thought were not perfect. I thought it was a really good, a really solid closing, kind of like a solid B, maybe an 8.5 to 8.7 range if I was going to rate it. I actually liked opening a little bit better than closing. But again, they have very different They have different uses and different purposes. So I thought this was a really, really good closing. And then now, of course, I can't believe it was an hour and 53 minutes. She only left herself 7 minutes on rebuttal. That's another reason I knocked the grade down a little bit personally, because rebuttal was a bit of a struggle because she only had those 7 minutes. If she would have left herself, I would have left myself about 20 minutes for rebuttal. So that I think was another part that was not great about the closing, is that I think it went a little longer than even she was planning on it doing. Before we get to the defenses, let's read some questions and comments. Over under on tonight is the last night Wendy spends in her own bed. I do not think this is going to be the last night Wendy spends in her own bed. Peter, is it normal for the prosecution and the defense to both give rebuttals? Georgia was up 3x and defense 2x, I think. No, in this argument, no, the defense did not make a rebuttal argument. Adam, the evidence of Donna's knowledge before the M is pretty thin. I think it's a not guilty verdict or a hung jury. And again, so when we did Charlie, it was like 95%. Everybody thought he was guilty. Donna, I think, was closer to like high 80s, low 90s that she's guilty of this. I feel pretty confident that it's going to be a conviction across the board. That's my vibe of how this is going, because usually how jurors like motives and stories like this so much, and it just fits into play, and what she did afterwards relating back to what she knew before. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Sleuthy, nobody cares what you're wearing, Peter. Put those Crocs in sport mode. They're actually not Crocs. They're Lusos. They're like, bougie Crocs, if you will say that. I love them. They're my favorite shoes ever. I got influenced. Actually, somebody sent them to me. It was Annie Elise, actually, of 10 to Life. She's like, these are amazing. I was like, I got to get them. So I got them. So blame her for my kind of Crocs. Ashley, we need a lawyer, meet and greet in person Q&A. Oof. I don't know how that would go. We'll see. Buzzman, Peter, why was conscious of guilt not in the instructions? I'll be completely honest. I did not listen to all the instructions, so I'd have to go back. I didn't hear the arguments, so I don't have an answer to this one, Buzzman. I apologize. Don't forget fantasy football starts tonight. Oh, I did not forget. I am very excited to chill after I'm done with this, which I can't believe we're only done with the states closing. Let's get to the defenses here because we got a lot more work to do. All right. Basically, right in the beginning, she starts out with, we didn't bash Dan. We're the ones that elicited the good things about Dan Markel, the victim in this case. So let's jump to that. We got a big break, obviously. And then we get to Jackie Fulford giving this closing argument here after some arguments. All right, here she goes.
Good afternoon. It's been a long day. You've heard a lot, and I hope you'll stay awake so you can hear me too, okay? So it's been what, 2.5 weeks, I guess, since you started this venture with us, and you've heard an awful lot. And I'd like to take you back to my opening statement. In my opening statement, there were some things referred to today that I'd like to address. The first one is that I stood up in my opening statement and said all of these wonderful things about Dan Markel, and then I called witnesses to attack him. That is not true. That is not true. In fact, the defense is the only part of this case that actually elicited evidence through testimony about the good qualities of Dan Markel. We elicited that on cross from his ex-wife, Wendy. And all of
By the way, do you think they think this point is important? This is how she starts her closing argument. Do you think they think it's important that they didn't bash the victim, that they were uplifting in the beginning of the trial? I think they think it's incredibly important. That's why they led with it. Because if the jury believes that, it might be tough to overcome.
the things I told you in opening about what a wonderful man he was, a wonderful father, well-educated, successful, we elicited that testimony. And criticized today for having 2 witnesses who came and testified on the stand about the dissolution case and things that had been filed in it. That was not to attack Danny Markel. We didn't put that evidence on. The state is the one that made it an issue. They put those documents into evidence, the things that Mr. Markel had filed. So we're the defense and we represent Donna Adelson, and we're just supposed to say, okay, well, they put it in, let's just let it sit there.
It's like we had to call him a bumbling, verbose idiot because they put the family law file in. We couldn't just not say he was an idiot. It's like there's a lot of different ways you could have attacked that. Again, even if you want to go with the defense that I did not think was a great defense, which is this divorce was amicable, you didn't have to call him like a verbose idiot that wasn't going to win any of his legal challenges and was writing this like a law review article, which, by the way, that could be a fair critique, but it's not necessary. It's not helping your case as the defense, right? That's what you got to think about. Just because something's true, what is it? I think it was my wife said, her dad say, whenever you have something to say, like, is it nice? Is it true? And does it need to be said, right? And that third one is really important when it comes to trials. Does it need to be said? Not everything has to be nice that you say in trial, but is it true and does it need to be said are 2 very important things that we should think about as lawyers before we say something in trial.
We have an obligation to represent our client. And what happened in that divorce, whether it was contentious or not, was an issue the state brought up. They've been calling this a bitter custody battle for years. And they started this case by saying the same thing. So to have the people who were actually involved in the case point out that there never was a bitter custody battle is important, because there never was one. There was never a time when they were fighting over somebody having access to the children. In those pleadings, nobody says, you can't have them, I've got them. You can't have them, I've got them. When they filed their initial pleadings, they did what everybody, according to the lawyer who was on the case for Mrs. Adelson, meaning Wendy, on the case for Wendy, they all filed their typical pleadings. And in the beginning, you asked for certain stuff, and she asked for 5149, maybe for a tax purpose. But there was never one single time, and you can't be convinced that relocation was the issue where they were going to take Danny Markel's kids away from them. If you believe that, you are ignoring the evidence that the state of Florida put on against Donna Adelson. And when I told you in opening that this was all about theory and belief of what a motive was, and there was no evidence that a crime was committed by my client, Donna Adelson, that is exactly what has happened in this courtroom. The state is ignoring the evidence that came in through their witnesses that support our defense. And instead, they stand before you with calls and text messages, and they tell you what they mean. That's not evidence. Their argument about what a conversation means is not evidence. You decide what it means. You've got it in front of you, and you have to consider it in the context of all of the evidence that's presented, not just what the state puts in, but what the defense puts in. And I know at some point when we were putting on evidence, you all were looking probably at me like, what are you doing? Who cares?
Don't say that. You don't want to admit that. I feel like she could have said a couple things in closing that I was like, you don't want to say that. You really don't want to say that. And I'm going to try to highlight the good points and like what the defense, like what the jury could be chewing on back there that the defense said. There were definitely some low moments in this closing, and that was one of them. She went through some of the facts. She used the demonstrative aid that she had Rivera write on, which I thought was impactful and really good that she did, crossing Rivera, like circle everybody you know was connected to this. And, you know, Donna was not one of the ones that he felt was like connected to this. So again, if the jury's wondering, you know, how much did she know? How much did she not know? She admits the emails do say some crazy stuff. I'm going to just kind of jump to when she puts the actual email up on the screen, which I thought was a wild decision. Okay. She puts this email up on the screen with all the names that Donna calls Mr. Markel. Why in the world are you doing this? And if that wasn't bad enough, she reads every single one of these awful names that Donna, admittedly, in her own words, called Dan Markel. Now, I think it's perfectly fine to make an argument like, and I actually agree with the argument, like if everybody that's ever called somebody an a-hole or an effer or something like that, if they're guilty of this crime, there'd be a lot more people in prison for the rest of their life. I think that's a fine argument. I think that's a fine argument. But why do you need to not only put them up in front of the jury, but also read them? I think that was a complete swing and a miss, another misstep, another something you do not want to do in closing as a defense attorney. Then let's see if I can find this timestamp. So then they start to get into Charlie's defense a little bit and how she says something like, they got into Charlie Adelson over our objection. Totally inappropriate to argue that. You can't argue you objected to something, but it still came in, and you cannot make those types of arguments. But there was no objection, again, because people don't necessarily object as much during closing. But let's hear her talk a little bit about what they got into with Charlie and how she feels about it.
Actually did it, and it's been proven. And we're distancing ourselves from that. They're the ones getting the warrant. Anybody claiming you said the word stupid? What if she had gotten it? Do you want to know what it accuses her of? That a 3- and 4-year-old said that they called Abba, that she had called Abba stupid. Stupid. And that drove her over the edge. One, she didn't know about it, but two, somebody claiming you said the word stupid. That's what brings us to murder charges? It's unbelievable. But that's their spin that they want to put on it, because they've got this theory that she's the mastermind. And then they stand up here in their closing and they say, everybody who's been charged in this case, so they want to point at the other one, point at the other one, and point at the other one. No, 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 no. Who is pointing at these people? The state of Florida. The state of Florida is doing the pointing. They're the ones getting the warrants. They're the ones doing the investigation. They're the ones charging people, deciding who they're going to give deals to and not. That's them pointing the finger. That's not.
And this is something I actually think is a decent argument where, she talked about probable cause again, which I don't think came off well with the witness, but to say these people were all charged way before Donna. Donna hadn't been arrested and all stuff because they had way more evidence on all of them. They had probable cause in them to tap their phones. They didn't do that with Donna. It was all these other people. It's not Donna. Again, like I said, pointing the finger at other people can sometimes be a very successful use and can make create reasonable doubt in the juror's mind. Judy said, I may be in the mind. That was probably really loud for everybody. Muted it. Okay, it's unmuted now, I think. Sorry, my bad. Apologize. I knocked over my mic and muted it because I talk with my hands too much. I may be in the minority, but I think Fulford did about as good of a close as she could with what she had to work with. She gave me a little reasonable doubt, though not enough to acquit. So when you hear my score for her, it's going to be better than her opening. I think it was better than her opening. And she did. I'm trying to highlight some of the good things that she did. There was obviously some mistakes. It's obviously a very difficult case. It's an uphill battle, but there were some highlights and some good points that she made. And we're going to talk more about them as we go.
My client? There's no evidence of that. They bring the charges. They prosecute. They get the convictions. They get people sent off to prison. Not us. What? We're pointing the blame at the killers for killing them? They proved that those are the people who killed them. That's not us pointing the finger. They actually did it, and it's been proven. And we're distancing ourselves from Charlie Adelson? Let me tell you something. They elicited the testimony about Charlie Adelson over our objection, if you happen to remember that. It came in. Charlie Adelson is not on trial. You may be sitting in that jury room thinking, well, Charlie did it, and it sure looks like Wendy did it. That doesn't have an ounce to do with Donna Adelson doing a thing.
Charlie did it, and Wendy Adelson probably did it, or maybe did it, whatever she said. That's not the only time she says that in this closing. Things that make you go,
Not a single thing. If you think he did it, he's been convicted. He admitted in his testimony that he is the person, although he claims he was extorted, he is the person that took $138,000 out of his refrigerator size safe that he has at his house with the money exactly like he says he kept it, stapling $100 bills together in stacks of 1,000, staple, 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 staple. He said he took that money out of his safe and he gave it to Catherine McBanow that night. Whether that's his girlfriend and they're still fooling around on the side, that's between the two of them. That's got nothing to do with my client. He did it. But now they want to say,
To me, those are the better angles, right? Those are the things I'd lean into more. Not that it was an amicable divorce and not how great Dan Markel was. So she does lean into that a little bit. And I think that's a more effective argument potentially. I do. He says he was extorted. I was like, ooh, okay. But your client was saying the truth has finally come out. We're so excited the truth has finally come out. Like she was saying that. And I think if Georgia had more time in her rebuttal, she would have been able to dig into that more. Jill, do you think Charlie's lawyer knew he was guilty? Like, impossible for me to know. I'm not sure. Bok, hope you all continue the winning streak. Oh, from your mouth to God's ear. I always pulled for the Noles to take out the Gators and against Clemson. I do too. LOL, love Bobby Bowden. And with that, that's all I have to say is roll tide. Ooh, sorry. I'm sure it still hurts a little, but that's okay. Maria, can we get a lawyer, an STS stream since you're both in tally? Go Noles from a Gator. Thanks, Peter. We'll see. I don't know who's here or where anybody is. I know my schedule is always chaotic when I come up here because I got to hit certain restaurants. I got to do certain things I love doing when I'm here. My nephew's now up here, so I'm going to be hanging out with him tonight, and I'm sure this weekend. John said, stake money for the boys. John and yourself and crew. I recommend Savor in Tally. Have you tried that spot? Oh, yeah, I have. Have you tried it? Yeah. So John has been there. I have not. John's been up here a million years. I was only up here 7. We're getting Cali chicken tonight, which is like one of my favorite spots, not one of John's favorite spots, but it's waiting for me back at the condo as soon as this is over. And I can't wait. My mouth is watering thinking about it. Nurse of Interest Pizza. List your top sport 1, 2, and 3. I pickleball, golf, FSU. To watch or to play. To watch football is definitely number 1. Then to watch probably basketball number 2, and then golf number 3, pickleball number 4. To play right now is probably pickleball number 1, golf number 2, I guess flag football number 3, if I had to list it. You don't know anything anyway. Could have been referring to the fact that Rob was unaware that they were even getting a divorce or having problems. He was disconnected from Wendy's life. He didn't know anything. I tend to agree with you, Hugo Monk. That was not something that sticks in my head. I think when we bring up Rob, it could be a big deal. It could be something the jurors think about. I know a lot of other people watching have thought it's important. I would still list it every time I was the state like they did, but that's not as big as some of the other things. That the one-way ticket to Vietnam, the confession potentially to the jailhouse snitch, what she did after the bump, it involves the 2 of us. Stopping at Charlie's house, those are the things. Leaving within 48 hours, not going to the funeral, changing the kids' names. Those are all bigger to me about her mindset at the time, her foreknowledge, as Alan Shapiro likes to say. Charlotte, second interview for my dream job today. Wish me luck. Might be leaving corrections. Thanks for always being there, Peter. I look forward to these. Charlotte, whenever I hear somebody say the words dream job, it gives me goosebumps to think you're going to get your dream job, interview for it. People should take that leap more often. Go for your dream job. If you don't get it, you don't get it, but you should always at least try. What can they say but no, right? All right, let's keep listening here.
Donna Adelson did it. Pick one. You don't like our theory? That's what they say. You don't like our theory? Oh, well, you like our theory on everybody else. Pick one. If you have prosecuted Charlie Adelson for paying the $138,000 staple, just like their other witnesses in this case said, why are they now saying Donna Adelson provided the money? Oh, wait. Oh, because Catherine McBanois, who's been sentenced to life and is telling her 6th story now, has decided she'd like to see her kid someday. So now she's going to come in and provide information that will help the state prosecute an innocent woman so she can go home to her children.
Once again, I think this is a good argument. Talk about the timeline of what Katie said when she changed it, washing the money. It was damp. Now you remember that? Sprinkle some doubt. She was sprinkling some doubt for me. I'd be open to some conversations about some of this, right? I thought this was a good part of her closing. I really did. That's why I want to play it.
That's what that's about. So she claims that this all goes down. Charlie puts the money, Charlie, not Donna, Charlie puts the money stapled just like she knows he does into her trunk. She drives it the next day to Sigfredo Garcia, her baby daddy. He takes it out of the trunk, and a day or 2 later, she gets hers back. And she says he puts it in her closet, and to this day, she wants you to believe that that money sat in her closet and she spent it along the way. The records that Ms. Hull testified to, showing all her cash deposits, she clearly was doing something with it, right? But to this day, she wants you to believe she has absolutely no idea how much money she had. Never counted it. Really? She must have think y'all was born yesterday. But here's something. She's got this new thing she wants to testify to. That the money was wet, and Charlie told her that Donna had washed it. her money's wet, that she hasn't touched, that's been somewhere else for these number of days. Well, what did Luis Rivera testify to about his money that he got? He said it was weird. Well, how was it weird? Well, it was stapled in $100 bills, stacks of 1,000. Not a single word about wet, and he got his money before she did. He got it straight from Sigfredo. This washing money wet thing is nonsense, and they've already proven that it was Charlie Adelson's money that was paid through Katie Magbanawah to those two killers. Whoops, it's gone. But now it's her fault. And I'm not sure what this is all about. The state standing up saying that the defense has suggested that Harvey is the one that did the Evite. We haven't said a single word.
I don't really care about that. They kind of go back and forth on whether Harvey sent the Evite, whatever. That doesn't really matter as much. But I thought those were some pretty decent points that, Rivera didn't say the money was wet. You're just trying to sprinkle some reasonable doubt. Can you explain how she meets first degree, i.e. the requirements? So if she is a principal who planned, solicited, paid, hired somebody to commit first degree, she's as guilty as first degree as the person pulling the trigger. That's how it's explained. If you're in that conspiracy and you were in furtherance of it and you committed acts and took steps and knew what was happening and there was a meeting of the minds, you can be guilty of that as well, even if you don't pull the trigger. Personally, the defense's misstep during closing with the video of Wendy calling Donna from the PD, I felt I was watching a rocket that failed to launch. They played a couple things that made me think we've got 2 hours, we might as well use it, because I was like, why is this stuff still playing? Excited to crush you this week in fantasy, Peter. Yes, Jen. We've got our little side bet. Jen's either going to get some Lawyer You Know merch or I'm getting a donation to the charity of my choice from Jen's wallet. Elephant in the room. Why was Charlie brought to tally? Did you see the video where they stopped for Wendy's? Do you think that was intentional? I'm not positive. I don't know if it was intentional as far as the second part. Charlie was on the witness list, so potentially they were going to call him. They decided not to. Hey, Peter, was it odd the defense took a break in the middle of their closing? I've never seen that. It was so curious. Maybe they needed a bathroom break. I did think it was a little weird, and I thought right when she came back, she was a little off at the beginning after that break, but then I think it ended up being fine. As a juror, I think she could have done it, but I don't think they proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'm hearing more of this than I expected. So, Kelsey, why don't we throw a poll up there? Why don't we just say guilty of something, guilty of nothing, or hung jury, and just put, what do you think the outcome is going to be? Guilty of something, guilty of nothing, which would be not guilty of everything, or a hung jury. I know it's not perfect, but just to get kind of an idea. Sabertooth, thank you for gifting 5 Lawyer You Know memberships. Norman's dad, can you recommend a Tampa Taylor? I hate making fun of people's clothes. I feel bad. Man, I feel bad when people have situations like that. Is there any way this defense attorney keeps blaming Wendy like this without Donna signing off on it? Theoretically, either signing off on it or understanding it's what she has to do at this point, but she's not going to flip on Wendy. What the lawyers argue is not evidence against Wendy, so maybe she's okay with it. All right, where do I want to jump to next? Oh, another thing I thought was good. Okay, let's listen to this. Well, of course, this is not what I think is good, but she helps Danny with the kids. She makes him his banana bread that he likes. She doesn't hate him like that. It's like, I don't know that that's great. But let's listen to this. I thought this was a pretty decent argument.
Not knowing about it. And he does it again and again. And the last time that he does it is he hates her because he filed a motion. Now, I want to talk about the day that Danny was killed with respect to my client. We're not going to go through all the details again, but what is the evidence about my client? The state has said that my client tried to set up an alibi for her daughter. I don't know how it could have ever been considered an alibi because the man was going to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the evidence is he got killed around 11 o'clock. But State's Exhibit 64FF is from the Geek Squad. And the state presented earlier that not only did Donna Adelson send an email to Wendy that morning, or before then actually, not only did Donna send an email to her about the appointment, but Harvey, the dad, did as well. And here is the form that was completed, not by Donna. They say Donna arranged it. Mr. Harvey actually made this appointment for the broken television. They had purchased a plan for protection on this television and believe they may get a replacement or a repair. When they made it, you have to fill out some information on the form. And what does this say? Would you be willing to accept a sooner appointment if one became available? Yes. Well, now, are you going to accept an earlier appointment if it becomes available? If you've got
Not a bad point, right? If this alibi was like the whole thing and without this, they're going to think Wendy did it. It's like, we all know how those blocks are of time, right? When somebody's coming to install something or repair something, 8 to noon, sometimes 8 to 5 o'clock. And then would you accept an earlier one if it's available? They say yes. I thought that was not a bad argument as well, right? Wendy would rather be dead than arrested. Neither she'd ever allow the boys to reconnect with the Markel family. I fear more tragedy is ahead. I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not. Did I miss where they explained why the script happened? They admit she wrote it, but I don't recall them ever explaining why the other was obvious. So the way they said it is, watch this video. Who sits down first? Who brings the pen and paper? Who's tapping? Just to say all these people, these jailhouse snitches, you can't believe them, discredit them. They wanted their get out of jail free card. That's how they explain it. They never explain the content, how we got to the content. Cheryl gifted 10 Lawyer You Know memberships. That's amazing, Cheryl. Thank you so much. I think there was a little bit more I wanted to hear of this. Actually, I don't think I need to hear any more of that. Then they listened to, Donna at TPD, which I'm like, I think kind of cuts both ways. I probably would have just reiterated what the witness said, that yes, Donna was appropriately shocked, basically. They got the killer's SunPass records. Why didn't they get Donna's? They put a wire on Charlie and Katie's phones, not Donna's. That was a good argument. She said Sanford said he never made a mistake. Not so sure he said never made a mistake, but I think he said a suspect. He's always been right about suspects, potentially something to that effect, which I thought was probably a little bit too far, but not enough to make an argument. All right, the votes are in. 89% think she's going to be guilty of something. 8% think hung. 3% think guilty of nothing. I'm surprised with all the comments that have said they don't quite think they're there. People are saying a verdict is in. Can you? Okay, it's a black screen. As soon as the verdict comes in, we will be going live and streaming this verdict together, folks. I guess I can jump ahead there now. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump ahead to the screen. Is this the black screen you're seeing too? All right. So we are showing court live. People are saying a verdict is in. Can you check Twitter to see if that's confirmed? Huh? Oh, okay. Hold on a second. All right, so I'm going to leave this up here and I'm going to turn the sound off on the video until it's actually in court. And we will still keep talking about closings and answering your questions. Thought at least Peter's happy. Roll Tide. See, it's always glass half full. I like that. 3 hours and 9 minutes. Somebody just said the clock started again now. Okay, so Twitter is saying there's a verdict. 3 hours and 9 minutes, very close to Charlie's. What's the least most she could get? She's probably going to get life. She's probably going to get life. I haven't gone through if there's minimum maximums for some of the other stuff like solicitation, but I think she's going to end up with life. Last I checked, which was years ago when this case kind of first started. It's called X, not Twitter, John O'Rourke said. Thanks for your awesome coverage, Peter. Very in a Tennessee case, interested in Tennessee case, Austin Drummond charged with M of 4 family members, was out on attempted M charges. Where should I send this info? Jail seems run by drugs. LawyerYouKnow@gmail.com. Okay, we're getting close here. In my opinion, Jackie made me cringe, made me think about others' participation, but didn't vindicate Donna or throw doubt on the prosecution. Yes. Yes. All right, we are just working on some logistics on the back end, changing the tile, things like that. My buddy, who's a lawyer in Tallahassee, just texted me verdict. Seems so. By the way, let's talk about what this indicates, a 3-hour verdict. Okay, you guys probably already know this by now. We've watched a lot of trials together. And at the end of the day, a quick verdict like this usually means guilty. You guys know that by now. You've been around for enough of these trials to where when it comes back this quick, usually it's guilty. That's kind of the way I felt it was going to go and the way I was leaning on this case. Not really a big surprise to me. I think it's going to be a surprise to some. Definitely not a hung jury, but we've got a verdict, right? So at least not a hung jury. At least we've got some finality here. Trying to think if there was any other important points I wanted to make about her closing. She said that she thought the state made a mistake calling Rob. I don't know that the general public agrees with that. She went through all the elements of all the crimes. She started talking about Vietnam, how it was more of a vacation. Could she have done it? Maybe. Did she do it? Probably not enough. Charlie, yup. Wendy, maybe, but nothing on Donna. That's kind of how she ended it. Okay. I'm going to check some other feeds as well. Or John, can you check? Can you check Law and Crime? And no one else has the court up. Okay. Let's throw it like this here while we're answering some questions. Richard, I don't know if she knew about the M before it happened, but I think she definitely knew about it after it happened. I think she should have taken a plea deal for her aid in the cover-up of the M, if it was potentially offered, which we don't necessarily know. As a lawyer, would you feel good or bad about dealing with this ordeal for this long of a time? Not great. I would want to see this thing out or just sign off and do another case. No. I would definitely want to see it out if I'd done this much work, but I wouldn't love it if it took 11 years to get this kind of justice. I would have hoped to have done it sooner, but sometimes you can't, and you've got to get it. You've got to get the justice as best you can. And I think that's what they're doing here. Everybody hit that like button, by the way. We're in overtime. I forgot to say it at the 1 hour mark, probably because I'm starving. I can't wait to eat that California chicken. Jury has reached a verdict. My buddy texted me, Cali Chicken Grill, didn't even know that place was still open. It is. I'm keeping it afloat every time I come in town. It's very expensive for chicken and rice, but I just love it. Christy, 2 live verdicts in 2025 with Peter and Lawyer You Know. We are so lucky. I'm pretty pumped. Jen, Peter, now more time for golf tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to be golfing. I didn't bring my clubs and my family's in town with me, but would have been fun. I tried to plan it out, but didn't end up working. Will you take one and tell her to take one, John, of what I just posted in the chat? And post it with the link. Oof, I don't think I could convict grandma to life when she didn't pull the trigger. And that's, what's funny is the prosecutor knew that that would be an issue. Hold on. I'm going to just make sure there's nothing going on in court here.
Remind them of what was said.
No. Okay. It's still them talking about it. But the prosecutor knew this might be an issue for some of the jurors, which is why she said, you agreed to follow the law, even if you don't like it. And it sounds like Deb doesn't like it. Oof, I don't think I could do that. Sounds like you don't like it, which is okay, but you still have to follow the law. Hashtag go dogs. There's only one team, or actually there's 2 teams I won't read. Hashtag go them. You guys know who they are. Thank you for being here for the verdict. Hey, it just worked out. I drove all the way up here today. It just worked out that we're going to be able to react to the verdict together live. Would you have voted guilty, Peter? Yes, I think I would have voted guilty in this case, but I also don't think I would have been a right juror for this case because I knew so much about the other cases as well. People are saying Law and Crime has it live, so I'm going to pull that one up here. Oops, it's not the right one. All right, I am going to pull Law and Crime's feed instead of Court TV's. It's just Court, at least. All right, so at least we're in the courtroom now. Peter just got back from California in time for the verdict. What's next for court? I don't know. I gotta get through this. Gotta get through this verdict first, and then we will talk about what is next. Is it me or did Jackie get close to telling them they could hang? She did say it's got to be unanimous. If it's not unanimous, then, okay, we're going to pull up court now. She said if it's not unanimous, then there are procedures for that. Too many windows open.
Having reviewed the verdict form, it is in its proper order. At this time, I will publish the verdict. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Mrs. Adelson, control yourself. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the indictment, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Count 3. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3 of the indictment, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And it is signed and dated by the foreperson. One moment. Members of the jury, the bailiff will escort you to the jury room. Mrs. Adelson, while this was not the outcome I'm sure that you desired, there will not be any further outbursts in front of the jury. If you cannot control yourself, I am going to have to determine if you'll be removed from the remainder of this process. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Do you need a moment to collect yourself? Before the jurors are brought back in, we will take a brief 2-minute break. Please give her tissues if she needs them. When the jurors are brought back into the room, does the defense wish to have the jurors polled before they are discharged? Yes, Your Honor. Very well.
All right. While she gathers herself, let's talk about a few things. Number one, Peter, how does it feel to have I don't really know what it's saying, but how do you handle a client with an emotional outburst like this? Basically, you handle it before the verdict comes in. You tell them this can happen. You could get convicted. You tell them like, it's not over. We can still appeal. You try to give them a little hope, but you deal with it beforehand so that they don't do this. I know the judge sounds harsh because it's like, hey, she's going to prison for the rest of her life. She's going to outburst. And like, who cares at this point, right? You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Who cares if you piss the judge off? I get all that, but there are lines. And I think the judge handled this perfectly. Like, Ms. Adelson, calm down. I'll give you 2 minutes to gather yourself, send the jury out. The defense wants to poll the jury. Let's do everything right. And for everybody worrying about sentencing, so I didn't really want to dig into it too much because I knew it was very, 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 very likely that Donna Adelson would be going to prison for the rest of her natural life. These appeals, they're going to happen. They're going to be long. They're going to be grueling. They're going to be difficult. They're not a high likelihood of success, but they're going to happen. So how fast will they get the warrant issued for Wendy after this trial, or maybe Harvey? I don't know. It's been their MO. That's what they've done every case. So if I'm Wendy and Harvey, I'm sweating tonight. I'm sweating. Chris, thanks, Peter. Thoughts and prayers for the Markel family and Dan's children. Absolutely brutal. Even though this is another step towards justice, there's no rectifying this. There's no making it better. There's no making it understandable for anybody. All right, let's take a listen back into court.
Of the trial. Please bring back in the jurors so we can conclude their portion of the trial. Members of the jury, before I discharge you for this evening, I am briefly going to poll you concerning whether your verdict is unanimous at the request of one of the parties. When you hear your last name, please appropriately respond.
We're not going to be able to hear this because we're not going to hear the juror names, but we're going to see a reaction in the courtroom if it's not unanimous, if they don't say that. And that's also why you can't have Wendy having these outbursts, because what if a juror's like, holy crap, I feel bad, I changed my vote now, I'd actually is not unanimous when they poll the jury. That's why we can't have stuff like that happening. I do agree with the comment. How could you possibly compose yourself in this situation? I get it. Feels impossible. Completely understandable all the way around.
Special privilege of this case. I also wish to advise you of some very special privileges that are enjoyed by jurors. No juror can ever be required to talk about the discussions that occurred in the jury room except by court order. For many centuries, our society has relied upon juries for consideration of difficult cases. We have recognized for hundreds of years that a jury's deliberations, discussions, and votes should remain their private affair as long as they wish it. Therefore, the law gives you a unique privilege not to speak about the jury's work. Although you are at liberty to speak with anyone about your deliberations, you are also at liberty to refuse to speak to anyone. A request to discuss either your verdict or your deliberations may come from those who are simply curious, from those who might seek to find fault with you, from the media, from attorneys, or elsewhere. It will be up to you to decide whether to preserve your privacy as a juror. With that being said, I want to extend my thanks on behalf of the entire Second Circuit for your service in this matter. You are discharged. Have a good evening. As to the jury's verdict, with the jury having found the defendant guilty of the 3 charges of the indictment, is the defense asking for a pre-sentence report on counts 2 and 3. As to count 1, the penalty is statutory, and essentially there is no modification for it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, pre-sentence investigation.
He's like, do we really need to do this? Because we know she's going to prison for the rest of her life. They want it. Okay.
And the report is ordered by the court as to counts 2 and 3. As to count 1, is there any reason why we cannot proceed to sentencing on this matter?
Your Honor, we would request an opportunity to ensure that our client is okay before we proceed to sentencing. It's my understanding that Charlie Adelson wasn't sentenced right away. We're asking for the same courtesy.
Very well. The court then will set a separate sentencing date.
May I inquire whether the family members that are present would like to give victim impact now or at the future date?
Go ahead.
Something else I just want to point out, because somebody said I'm shocked at how Donna is shocked. She said, like, I'm next. I know I'm next. I know what's going to happen. Bury me in this dress. So it's like she knew that once Charlie was convicted and they didn't, buy the truth, or the jury got it wrong, that there's at least a chance this is going to happen to her, right? So I don't know. I have mixed feelings on this. I feel horrible for anybody that's faced with this, but the evidence was overwhelming, in my opinion, right? I know everybody does not agree with that, and that's totally fine, and we're here for open discussion. Joanne, how could she think that she was not guilty of something, Peter? I don't know. People tell themselves things all the time and they begin to believe it, or she's putting on an act. I don't know. Or she actually didn't do it and it just looks like she did it with all the evidence. I don't know. Derek, I noticed that she can hear just fine when it comes to the verdict. Very pleased with the outcome. The defense witnesses did her no favors. Oh, the consequence of my actions. The judge was amazing during this. I do think he was a really great judge. I disagree with some things here and there. You know, at the long trial, it's going to happen, but I think he was really great. I like his disposition a lot. How long before Wendy's charges are announced? Only time will tell. So this is Dan Markel's mom who wants to make her statements now so she doesn't have to come back for another sentencing hearing, which I think is totally fair.
Yourself for the record.
Yes, my name is Ruth Mark. Sorry?
I'm worried you're gonna trip.
Okay, I already did. My name is Ruth Markel.
You may make your impact statement, ma'am.
Thank you, Judge Everett. To the Honorable Judge Everett, my name is Ruth Markel. I am the mother of the late Dan Markel. I stand before you today to express the profound sadness and grief that Dan's family and I have endured since his tragic murder. We have lost a treasure. My son Dan's life was cut tragically short at 41 years old. For 11 years, we have been forced to a life filled with unimaginable pain and heartbreak. Dan's father Phil and his sister Shelley share in this unending sorrow. Dan was a devoted father, brother, and son. Dan's life was marked by his devotion to family, education, and community. He was a loving, caring, and inspiring person. His academic journey included studying politics and philosophy at Harvard University, earning a master's degree later in political theory from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Emmanuel College in Cambridge, and later going back to Harvard to get a law degree. Dan was a prolific scholar and did start, co-founded the influential Prof's blog. His energy, drive, and sociability greatly enriched the FSU College of Law. Dan's life was filled with passion, music, dance, sports, travel, and people. But of all my son's accomplishments, however, I am most proud of the devoted father Danny was to his two sons, Benjamin and Lincoln. Dan was present, loving, and supportive, always putting his children's well-being first. He regularly attended the boys' daycares, reading with them. His office was filled with their drawings, and his living room filled with their toys. Dan was the boys' hero, and they have been forced to grow up without a father. Dan's murder has shattered our family and caused deep permanent pain. This was a particularly senseless crime, and the murder was particularly insensible. It was not revenge. Dan was a law-abiding and respectful citizen, an active father, and a living son. His life was devoted to teaching and helping others. The pain and suffering of Dan's murder goes well beyond other families too. That is why I wrote the book, The Unveiling, a mother's reflection on murder, grief, and trial life. In my unrelenting grief, I turned to advocacy to feel purpose and to help others with these tragic losses. I have found meaning and comfort to connect with others who want to serve justice. To all the community of journalists, TV programs, podcasters, Tallahassee communities, and the allies who have put their hearts in keeping Danny's story alive, we are full of thanks. To law enforcement and prosecutors, our gratitude is beyond for their dedicated, careful perseverance in seeking justice for Danny and our family. If Tallahassee is known for football, Tallahassee should be known for the prosecution and for law enforcement. They have done an outstanding job. These extraordinary efforts underscore the brutal truth of our family's story. Danny's murder was orchestrated by his former mother-in-law, Donna Adelson, and other co-conspirators, and is a crime of cruelty. It is a murder of grief, a murder of selfishly prioritizing one's own desires over what is just or right. And at its core, this was a murder of convenience, so that one grandmother could live closer to her grandchildren. She killed their father and ripped the children from the other grandparents' lives. Donna Adelson's crimes against Dan began long before his murder. She belittled Dan in front of his children. She spread lies about it and contributed to a brutal separation between Dan and Wendy. She rented the house, and Dan came home and he found that Wendy and the boys were gone with most of their belongings. He called this devastation Pearl Harbor. Donna's eagerness for Wendy to divorce Dan and to relocate to South Florida led her to increasingly devise desperate schemes. Despite these efforts, the court ruled that Wendy could not move the boys away from their loving father. Failing to achieve her goal through legal means, Donna finally resorted to orchestrating Dan's murder. She plotted, planned, and paid for his murder. Donna's crimes led to further devastation. Her middle son, Charlie, was convicted and sentenced to a life in prison for his role in facilitating Danny's murder for hire. Can you imagine a mother involving a son to complete a murder? Donna's eldest son, Rob, an honest and decent man, is estranged from the family, and her younger child, Wendy, has decided once again to relocate to another state. Her actions and those of her co-conspirators have caused children to lose their parents. Catherine McBanowitz, Freda Garcia, and Charlie Adelson, also convicted, are all convicted for life and have lost access to their children. Prior to her arrest, Donna's recorded phone calls with Charlie reveal their lack of a moral compass or capacity for self-reflection. She blames external forces for her family's curse. They're outside of her, but she is the curse, and lashes out angrily at witnesses who took the brave step to testify. Her modus operandi has always been to run from Tallahassee and then to try to flee to Vietnam. For our family, there is no such prospect for escape. Danny's absence, and that leaves a hole at the center of our lives, no matter where we go.
I don't want to interrupt this too much, but like this is brutally sad, but part of me is like, the rocks this takes to say this right to Donna Adelson and everybody listening. Like, this is what you did. I know this is what you did. You're paying for it. You brought your son into this. You took parents away from Catherine Mabanawan, Sigfredo Garcia's kids. You took Charlie away from his son. You took Dan away from his son. And now Wendy's moving to another state. And all you do is run. To stand up there and just say that is like, part of me is like, like makes you want to get behind her, like a coach with a speech that you could run through a wall for. That's the kind of vibe I'm feeling from Ms. Markel right now.
Yet Dan's murder was not enough for Donna. His death was not enough. Danny had to be fully erased from his beloved sons. The boy's last name was ever changed, an extraordinary decision to excise the Markel name from Phil's only grandsons who shared his last name. And after the first arrests were made, Donna didn't allow the Markel family to have access for over 6 years. It was only when there was a phenomenal Tallahassee advocacy group that passed the Markel Act. The passage of this bill was immediately followed by our first invitation to see the boys after the arrest. The door only cracked open. Despite these efforts, we remain excluded from the boys' lives. We were not at their bar mitzvahs or graduations. We have extremely highly choreographed visits and communications. We only wait for the day that Benjamin and Lincoln will visit their father and his grave, in his father's history, and his grave in Toronto. We want nothing more. The facts of Danny's murder, are difficult to swallow. The experiences Phil, Shelley, and I have been forced to suffer are profound as homicide survivors and victims of the criminal system. The lives of Danny's 2 sons, our grandchildren, were forever turned upside down by this crime. Benjamin and Lincoln were only preschoolers when their father was murdered, and now they are forced to confront and try to understand the unthinkable crimes of murder and the Adelsons' involvement. Our lives will never return to normal. For those who love Danny and for those who Danny loved, there is no escape from the wicked effects of what Donna Adelson set in motion, carried out, and paid for, and for many years enjoyed the aftermath of. Donna Adelson has caused immense devastation and an untimely, undeserved murder through her actions. While no trial or verdict can ever heal the profound wounds caused by Dan's murder, justice must be served. I respectfully ask the court to impose the maximum sentence on Donna Adelson. Her lack of cooperation and remorse throughout the case demands justice, the justice that Dan's life and memory fully deserve. We are immensely grateful to the court for its careful and compassionate deliberation. Respectively, Ruth Markel.
Thank you, Ms. Markel. Are there any other victim impact statements this evening?
We're going to also hear from Dan's dad. Let's answer a couple questions here. Would the lessers she was going to have had a potential shorter sentence? Yeah, but it just really was never their argument. It was never their argument to go that route. So our previous cases have been more explosive. Was this one more normal? There's nothing normal about this case, I don't think. Maybe less explosive, but I don't think it was normal. Who's next, Wendy or the husband? You guys tell me. Who do you think is next? Put it in the chat. Is it my imagination or are there no tears? Where are the tears? You guys are always better at that than me. I can't ever tell. Wouldn't her nose be running if she was crying that hard? Not trying to be rude, but come on. Yeah, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't like getting into that because I don't know if there are tears or not. Hey, Peter, John, in chat, you know I'm late, but just in time for the verdict. Is there ever a time when a juror feels bad and changes their mind during the poll after seeing the defendant's reactions? Not that I know of that specific. There have been times when a jury's been polled and they're like, that's not my verdict. That creates a whole issue. But I don't necessarily know that it's ever happened from one of them feeling bad. Peter, do you think they will go after Harvey? I mean, I guess if they went after Donna, they could go after Harvey. I don't know that I would. I don't know what they're going to do in this case. It's really hard for me to imagine how many years this has gone on and step by step. If I was the prosecutor and I thought I had enough for Wendy, I would go Wendy over Harvey, but I don't know if they feel like they have enough. Markel was an a-hole. Adelson, guilty as F. Sad for the kids. Okay, I don't think he was an a-hole. Jillie Mae. Wendy has some truly unexplainable behaviors, but I don't think they have enough to convict. I think the most they could get Harvey for his accessory, and I don't think they'll bother. I do think it'd be much, much more difficult to get Wendy, but Wendy is winning the polls in the chat by a significant margin here. All right, here is Mr. Markel.
I'm to speak about the impact of Donna Adelson's actions on my families and the families of so many others. While this victim impact statement is addressed to you, Your Honor, it is also intended for the Adelson family, Harvey, Charlie, Wendy, and particularly Donna. I would like them to understand and reflect on the deep and irreparable damage they have caused. The pain that they have caused my family is obvious and permanent, but they have also caused lifelong harm to their own immediate family and so many other families and children around. Donna's selfishness, cruelty, and complete disrespect for human life, along with that of her co-conspirators, have left families forever broken. Louis Rivera, his children have no father. Catherine Magbanawa and Sigfredo Garcia, their children have no parents. Charlie Adelson, his son, Roman, has no father. Rob Adelson and his wife and their two children have lost their uncle and grandparents. Shelley and Ian, my daughter, their three children, my grandchildren, are left without an uncle and are separated from their cousins. Of course, their heinous and callous actions have left me, Ruth, and Shelley without our Danny, and Ben and Lincoln without their father. For anyone to commit such a cold-blooded, unprovoked act of murder is horrific. For Donna, someone who claims to care so much about Ben and Lincoln, her sun shines, her actions are beyond comprehension. She has harmed forever the people she claims to have loved. In the Jewish custom, we have an expression to always wish others to live to 120 years of age. For Donna, I wish her to live to 120, alone in her jail cell. I wish that every day of her remaining days, she thinks about the harm she has caused to so many, especially those two boys she claims to have loved so much. For these reasons, Your Honor, I ask the court sentence Donna Adelson to the maximum possible sentence. And my only short question to Donna, was it worth it? Respectfully, thank you.
Wow. Wow. I mean, again, it hits right where it hurts. And it's true. Like, everybody's lost their family. Everybody that ever came into connection with the Adelsons, with these Adelsons, their family is damaged, gone, not what it should have been, not whole, fractured. And then he's like, yeah, we wish people live 120. I do wish you lived 120 by yourself in your jail cell. Woof. I mean, that's.
Thank you, Mr. Markel. Are there any other matters that the court needs to address this evening, Ms. Copeland? With the PSI being ordered, the court will pronounce the sentence as to counts 2 and 3 after it's been completed. The parties have had an opportunity to review the pre-sentence investigation report and make any objections if they believe they need to. As to the 3 counts that the jury has found the defendant guilty of, I will adjudicate her guilty at this time, but the sentence will be pronounced as to the 3 counts at a later date. She is remanded for sentencing at this time. Lieutenant Henry, please notify the commander at the jail that the appropriate screening needs to take place to ensure that the defendant is in an area where she is not subject to any self-harm. For a case management date coming up, what would the party?
And that, for her to be put in a place where she can't hurt herself is based on her prior things that she's said and done. There's a history of that. So that's why they have to guard against that.
Request.
October court date, Your Honor.
Leave that is 10/14. Is that correct? 30. Aware that the PSI needs to be completed as soon as possible. We will reconvene on October 14th. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right. That's it for the Donna Adelson trial. Typhus said Wendy is going to lose in the end, even if not charged. I agree. And I still think they can convict her, even though I haven't seen enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, you see how the story goes. You can see how a jury would buy that. The boys will learn the truth and realize their mom changed their name from their own dads. I can't wait for them to become adults and see their mom for who she is. I don't wish that on them, right? I mean, it's a really sad outcome all the way around. Wendy wouldn't agree to Donna's crazy ideas. I can't see her signing off on a hit. Plus, she seems to have real lawyers, Trump lawyers. I have no idea who her lawyer is. I don't know if it's Trump's lawyer or somebody else. Rhonda, maybe I missed the part of family court, but I've seen so much hate for Dan. I don't get it. He was fighting for his kids. You should be tough and passionate. I get why people hate each other in family law. I get it. But shouldn't lead to this. Adelsons do not value life, just a normal fix to a plan with no heart. Brutal. But that's all we got for tonight. I hope you guys learned something through this trial. Hopefully we can all learn something from all these cases. I'm going to bring my dad on, talk about it at the podcast this week, the defense's case in chief and the verdict. So if you guys have questions, send them in. Make sure you guys hit the like button on this video and let me know what you're watching and what you're catching up on, because we got time starting next week. So we're going to get into something new, something different, or follow up on something we're already covering. But I really appreciate you guys so much for being here throughout the entire trial. I know there's so many different options to watch. I love it when you come here, hang out with me, ask your questions, give your input. But until next time, that's all we got. So I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.